right, welcome guys. Another episode of Lean Pulse. So we're going to have an interesting conversation and want to make sure that people understand when we bring this topic up that it's not intended to offend anyone. This is to help people look in the mirror. We apply this same thing to ourselves. But the topic is leadership poison, avoidance, arrogance, or ignorance. And I came up with that three-part phrase. And again, you have to be careful which audience you use it with. But the reality is leadership suffers from one of those three, sometimes more than one. Avoiding the hard things to do. That's too hard to do. Ignorance. I don't know what I should do. Arrogance. That's okay. We're already doing really well. And what I found from the arrogance part is that it sounds like such a negative word. Arrogance typically comes from being uncomfortable, from being lack of confidence. Inside, the inner voice is saying, I really don't know what to do, but I have to act. It's that Hollywood leadership. I have to act as if I know what to do. Otherwise, people won't follow me. All three of those are poisons. They're dangerous and can lead to multiple problems. Um, I want to throw this to the group and just say, okay, so if that's the case, what do we do about it? How do we understand which of those three illnesses we're afflicted with, and what can we do about it?
Well, I guess what are the precursors to us becoming curious about in which state we're actually at, and feeling the safety to do something about it?
Yeah, that's a great question because you do need the safety for all three of those. Arrogance. I need to be willing to admit where that arrogance is coming from. Is it typically what I've found in working with so many people over the years? Arrogance is not a personality flaw. It is um, it's a band-aid. It's a accounting for an inner voice that's saying, you have no idea what you're doing. What are you doing leading this group? What are you doing trying to make these changes? You don't know what you're doing. So the external embodiment of that is, I absolutely know what to do. This is the way we're going to do it. And I already know what needs to be done. Let's go. Very, very dangerous. When you get to ignorance, again, it sounds like a negative term. Ignorance just means I don't have that information yet. Be willing to say that. I don't know what we need to do. I don't know the actual path out of this. But what I do know is I have some really smart people around me. I know I'm smart myself. And if we start to work together and pull the data together, we can turn that ignorance into information and start to move forward. The avoidance.
Simon Sinek talks a lot
Yeah.
about leaders having the courage to
Yes.
admit exactly what you just said, just to say, you know, uh, you all probably know more about this topic than I ever will. Can you run it by me again? I don't understand what you just said. And he tells an anecdote about a story where he was brought in to consult with a group. Some other consultancy was presenting an idea, and he raised his head and said, "Look, I know I'm on the outside. I'm not on the same page as everybody. I don't understand what you just presented. Try me again, please." And then another courageous leader said, I'm not very clear on that either. And all of a sudden, like around the room, everybody's like, yeah, you totally missed what you were trying to tell us. Take two. But if one person hadn't had that courage, they would have just moved on and completely lost the value that they had probably paid huge money to receive.
Yeah. And some of that comes from the avoidance.
That's right.
Sometimes avoidance is avoiding my ignorance, my lack of understanding. Again, ignorance is not negative. It's not a personality flaw. It is a deficit of information. And if you've surrounded yourself with the right people, with good, smart people that want to ask and answer questions and gather data, which any leader should do, that's exactly what you should do. Take advantage of the people you have hired. Take into account the information they bring to the table and the ability to find additional information. It's okay as a leader to say, I don't know the answer. But then you're following it up with this is where confidence comes in. This is where true servant leadership comes in. It's immediately followed with, but that doesn't really frighten me because I know I have the right people around me. I know we have the ability to gather the information, and I believe we can get the information we need to make the best possible decision. As soon as you succumb to any one of those three, either arrogance or ignorance or avoidance, you're already saying we can't move forward. We are where we are. This is the direction we're going, and it can't change.
Or we are already excellent. There is no um, we are choosing not to continue to improve ourselves.
Yeah.
Well, Dwayne, you talked about the arrogance one and mentioned avoidance, and we all know what avoidance is. But this ignorance one, I think it's really important to say, here's a real life example. And we've all seen this in every organization we've worked with. So think of that, and we use this in some of the stuff we teach, but you think of that lack of information that we have, and Dwayne, that's what you just brought up, is that lack of information. We think we're on track and we're not. And so if you think of when people are doing projects, how many times have we seen project status reporting going to a senior manager? We're green, we're green, we're green. And then
watermelon metrics.
Watermelon,
yep, watermelon. The day before everything is due, or maybe even the day that it was supposed to be done, all of a sudden, magically, some new information comes up, and it's not only red, but it's bright red, watermelon red.
We cut the watermelon open.
Yep. And what's really important is, and to me, these are part of the God, this is a strong word. It's the way we misuse information. So you just mentioned the person sitting in the room that asks a question, and that's a good thing, because all of a sudden you're moving it from being under the covers or under the table, the conference room table, so to speak, to above it. But you've got somebody that's asking the question. Really, really important. Most organizations, they have their metrics set up from project status reporting. You say, if you're more than 10% out of sync, you're going to go from green to yellow. And then if you're 20%, you go from yellow to red. But here's the crazy thing about that. In that world, in the waterfall world, when people are using projects, there's a bunch of studies that said, look, the average project is on average 60 or so percent over schedule. So a 12-month project is going to end up being 20. And about 40% or so, I think it was 45 in the study I'm thinking of, 45% over budget. So if you were basing it on $1 million, it's going to cost you $1.5 million. So now in the agile world, now we've got agile metrics, agile watermelon metrics. So now you've got people that are taking data from a tool and then mushing it around so it looks good for a senior manager. I was working with a company, and their GM got tossed into the mix because he was a problem solver, and he got brought into something that was being called a agile implementation using SAFe. And he had to start calling people on the table because they were interpreting the data out of the tool before they got it to him, and he was the GM, so he had a clue, and he started asking them. They're not looking at the tool. So ignorance might be as simple as that lack of information between current state and the tool and where we're at in reality, and not even looking at that. So it's not even ignorance. It's just saying we have a false sense of positive results.
Yeah, false positive feasibility. And it just brought to mind the Schrodinger's cat theory. When you think about, the cat that's been in the box for a while and the cat hasn't moved, well, the cat could be live, could be dead, it could be in both states. Until we open the box, we don't know. I just looked up some statistics. I did a quick Google search. Some of these numbers are worse than I thought, because I remember a quote back from 2014, I think it was the Standish Group. They came back and said 23% of projects deliver on time and on budget. Well, that's not very good. That's less than 1 out of 4. These numbers come back and some say that 91.5% of projects go over budget, over schedule, or both. And I like to ask leadership this question. Okay, you're going in for open heart surgery tomorrow. You have a 91.5% chance of it not being successful. That's are not good odds. You're
Yeah.
updating your will. Those and yet we move forward with those same things. And I think that's where some of that avoidance comes in, is I'm afraid to open that box to see that the cat is not alive. I'm afraid to cut that watermelon open to see those things, that false positive feasibility. Let's say it's a 6-month project. I've got 5 months and 2 weeks that I can go home happy, have fun with my family and things are okay. It's 2 months of hell that I have to face.
Two
So
weeks.
I'm going to avoid it as long as I can.
Yeah. And really, we're asking leaders for something that, as a leader, I would say is unreasonable. That my only visible, tangible, factual evidence of progress is going to be delayed 2+ quarters.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, that particularly with some of the budgets that we're asking for, it's unreasonable. And to your earlier point, an avoidant response. I mean, if I was a leader and I said, okay, I'm in, here's your budget, yeah, I'd be avoided too if my first news was going to come 2 quarters later. You know, the very first agile principle, our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable software.
Mm-hmm.
Early, I mean, it's like literally, okay, I'll give you one iteration, you know, one 2-week block to get your crap together, but that second one, I expect to see hello world or something, you know, solution appropriate, you know, equivalent thereof. You know, show me that you're actually on, you know, I bought into your roadmap. I bought into your initial take on where the direction that the value was going to take us.
And what we'll achieve.
Yep. So at least show me you're on the roadmap and that you're not in some rest stop. You know, it's give me some faith, you know, or give me some reason to have faith. And so, you know, so often, I don't know if in that same article, Dwayne, there were stats on how often, particularly in the old days, software projects were canceled at what looked like 85%. Now, granted, when a waterfall Gantt chart says that you're 94% complete, what it's really trying to say is that you have 94 remaining. Sad but true. I mean, you know, so if we can't show progress, and that perhaps what we would know as a minimum viable product, actually usable software, would come at, I don't know, 35% of the budget invested was delivered, so that we have a much different discussion then. It's more of a, how can we improve the flow of value so that we get more rapid delivery value to our customers, not, you know, we're sitting on the sidelines for quarter after quarter after quarter, hoping that next quarter we actually can satisfy our customers. If we have something out there that the customers find valuable.
Wait, you mean like the lean principle that allow customers to pull value?
Shocking, I know.
Yeah.
Well, nobody's ever thought of that before.
So, John, I have a theory I want to toss over to you, but when it comes to the arrogance, and again, please, audience, the word is not meant to be offensive at all. Arrogance can be a reaction. In fact, very often I found it is a reaction. And where I think oftentimes that arrogant reaction comes from, what choice do I have? All I can do, this is the only option I have. We have one way of delivering value. What else can I do but say, this is the way that works? Even when I look at the empirical numbers and realize, oh my gosh, over 90% of the time, we're not going to deliver on time or on budget. But what else choice do I have? But John, you've managed some really large budgets and efforts and things. There are ways to get rid of that arrogance, to have real information and data that gives you confidence, not arrogance.
Well, and as because you referenced Standish and that figure that you mentioned, the over budget and over schedule. I always remember Standish Group's definition of their word challenge projects. Over budget, over schedule, or did not deliver the intended functionality. So that was that third thing too, to tie together the iron triangle
didn't
technique.
deliver what needed.
Yeah. So and by the way, really important, when you go back to the original reports, they actually in the report. So most people only see summary data from those things.
Yeah.
If you ever get your hands on a real report, it actually breaks it out by dollar and by duration. So when you see stuff under 100 grand, people, or actually, I think the one I saw was under 50 grand, people nail them every time. But then you get up to, something that's over $10 million, and the probability of success, I think from the one that I'm remembering, I think it was either 2 or 3% successful. So as you go up in size and duration. So when you start thinking about all these things and how it actually applies, now think about it. When we start talking about switching from that traditional methodology into flow, and we start trying to get people to think in thin slices, think of your capacity, think of your features in thin slices, get something out, Dan, to your point, get something out that works, and then let's build on it. So first off, we got to switch people's thinking. Getting to that point, it looks really different regardless of the amount of money you think you're going to spend on something. So matter of fact, I was working with some folks on some SAP, what were called SAP transformations in an agile fashion. And there's actually ways to do this huge thing using SAFe. Tens of millions of dollars saying, look, let's look at it like this instead, so we get stuff working. And Dwayne, I think that goes back to your question. How do you start looking at this differently? Because if you just have this big block of time and money and people, I mean, I remember one time on this, honest to goodness, this is when I realized this was crazy thinking. I was trying to estimate what folks on a test team were going to be doing 3 years from now for 80 hours. And you start to realize this is crazy talk. And that was that was before I actually got to with that same company. We went and started working with the Lean Engineering Institute at MIT and started figuring out that we had crazy talk. But as you start going down there, in order to increase our knowledge, which addresses both the ignorance, the arrogance, and the avoidance type thought, you're saying, look, we have to start to understand some things at this level. And when you have a number with a comma and lots of zeros after it, from here's the funds that we've got to spend, you've got folks who are really big picture. We're talking things like, groups of epics. And you've got to get insight into the work being done. And we have to have insight. We have to be able to tie that together. We have to have that visibility from epics at the portfolio level all the way down to the features. Because, I mean, let's be honest, features are the currency that we're talking about when we're talking about SAFe. You get a feature done within a PI, you get ready to release it. Let's be honest,
Smaller
most
batch
folks
size.
never get to the point where their transaction costs have reduced enough to release story by story. Even though people think that they magically get there, they spend way too much time with manual intervention. But we've got to tie that together and then be able to show, hey, you think you've got 300 features to do, and this art in the last PI got 15 done. How long is that going to take? 20 quarters. Well, really 20 PIs, but senior managers talking quarters, not PIs. But if you have 12-week PI, 20 quarters, you get 300 of them done. They don't make that connection unless we start giving them a dashboard and a roadmap and this understanding of here's real results to say, here's something that actually makes a difference to you. This is our track. We can reduce that by adding more arts, more capacity to work the problem. But it's not magic. You don't, it's the watermelon is still the watermelon if you don't deal with the underlying stuff that's going on to get an organization to get what's done, what they want to have done. And by the way, and we've all seen this, just because people switch to using Agile and Lean and SAFe doesn't mean anybody's telling those senior managers, here's the truth now.
It's not a magic pill.
Right. And if you
Not
have
even
278 epics in work, and you've only got enough folks to work on 50 of them, those other 228 are still left by the roadside, or nothing ever gets done ever, because you're peanut buttering your capacity. And again, I'm using words to draw together this portfolio level to the art level, but these are tied together and it's really close. And gosh, we've got ways to tie together how much are we getting done at the feature level? What does that look like at the epic level for an organization? And say, how long is this epic really going to take you to get done? If you think it really is going to be that big to
Well,
run it out.
and that's where I think those three components, arrogance, ignorance, avoidance, can almost be phases. And Dan, I think you called them that at one point, because oftentimes the arrogance is where we start because we have no other choice. We are stuck there because we don't see I like to call it door number two. But then someone starts to tell us things like John was saying, and then it comes up to the ignorance. Well, how do you do that? How is that going to work here? And they need examples to see that. But then as they start to realize that it's the leader that has to change, that they will have to change how they work much more so than their teams, that's
right.
where it gets scary. And that's where the avoidance comes in. Yeah, that sounds great. Go ahead and do that with my teams, but don't count me out. I'll be over here in my office. And that again, that's not to pick on leadership because they have a lot of pressures on them and such. It's almost a natural human reaction. We
I'll be
have to
doing this company
understand.
presidential type stuff.
Yes. And it comes back to one of you mentioned it, that whole courage that I think, Dan, I think you mentioned it, having the courage to say, I don't know. And having the courage to look in the mirror and saying, that was a really arrogant response, that we already know how to do this. So why
So
did I make that statement? Because I don't know what to do.
yeah,
And when I start to gain the knowledge, I start to realize that's scary. I don't know that I want to do that.
yeah, we often talk about with students about the Dunning-Kruger curve and how uh, it's absolutely a representation of how um, human nature goes through its learning cycles. And when I look at the Dunning-Kruger curve and overlay ignorance, arrogance, avoidance, to me it exactly lays on top of that first blue peak. Ignorance is to the left of it when you're at low experience level or low wisdom or mastery levels, but your confidence is also low. So that's you don't know what you don't know. Once you reach a level of mastery, but still just the first segment, we're looking at a situation where it isn't that you know nothing, but you're a long ways from what we would consider to be a true master of it. And so very, very natural to be arrogant, because
It's
you
a
have
response
absolutely,
mechanism.
that's
Or
right,
it's a protection mechanism.
absolutely.
Hey,
Go ahead.
Dan, can I make a quick comment looking at this?
Absolutely, yeah,
Tie it together with what a senior manager is hearing.
that's right.
So now think about this. A senior manager seeing the status reports, whether you're talking reports out of a tool like Rally or version 1 or Jira or whatever, or project type metrics, it doesn't matter, but what they're hearing still might not really be ground truth. And they might not understand when somebody says we're 90% done, what they're really saying is, hey, we've consumed 90% of the schedule. And
Yes.
we don't know when we're going to get done. And that second part of it, they're afraid to talk about because of the organizational lack of safety, not with safety, but lack of safety. And so you've got to have folks that are highly assertive and highly cooperative to have those conversations.
Yeah, but highly assertive doesn't mean my way or the highway. Highly
Correct.
assertive means we are going to learn together, and I insist upon it.
And I'm going to bring up when I see something that just ain't quite right.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That just being tenacious, not taking no for an answer, or in this case, taking yes for an answer. That great. Team. I'm glad you're confident in your delivery. I don't see the evidence that supports that high level of confidence that you have. Let's all be from Missouri. Show me. Give me. Do we have concrete evidence? Because something is in production that you have delivered value, and or do you have this enormous release that you're hoping to push through, that we all know is going to be weeks or months to actually get live.
And Dwayne, I know we want to wrap this up, but every time we need to have a discussion about, the show me.
Yeah.
We need to have it, because Dan, to me, you're just talking, let's be showing people those system demos. Let's get them involved so they see what works.
Precisely.
And then we know what's
That's right.
left, not just
Yep.
what we got done, but what theoretically is left. But
Yep.
now there's so many questions embedded in there's what's left for release. And those are all questions for some future discussion. But
yeah, and that's a key. Wrapping this one up is the key to the three symptoms: the arrogance, avoidance, ignorance, is first of all recognizing it. Recognizing, oh boy, I'm really being arrogant about this. Why? Is it because I don't know what direction to go and I have no choice? What's causing that? Where's the ignorance coming from? I don't understand what's going on. Who can I talk to? What examples can I see? How can we break this down and do bite-sized chunks so that we can learn? The avoidance. What am I afraid of? What's concerning me? What are the fears? If this system, process, approach changes, what am I afraid of? What I've always said is people are not afraid of change. They're afraid of unknown outcomes. And the best way to deal with the avoidance part, which typically comes from fear of that unknown, is make it known as quickly as possible. Set where do we want to go? And based on what we know today, how do we think we are going to get there? So with that, another great discussion, guys. Let's wrap this one up and we'll see you in the next episode.
see you.